Can you imagine the sheer humiliation of your own flesh and blood looking you dead in the eye at her lavish rehearsal dinner, in front of 200 wealthy guests, and calling you embarrassing peasant stock? That is exactly what my daughter, Madison, did to me. She stood there in her designer gown, surrounded by Boston's elite, and whispered that I did not belong with real people like them. I did not make a scene. I did not yell. I simply turned around, walked out into the chilly night, and remembered every single word she said. But the universe has a funny way of shifting the balance. Just 3 days after her honeymoon, Madison called me. There was no apology on her lips. Instead, she had the audacity to ask for my $2.6 million oceanfront beach house. She claimed she needed it temporarily to resolve some minor financial issues. The very child who banned me from her wedding because she was ashamed of my background was now demanding my most prized retirement asset, telling me that I owed it to her. Before I share the satisfying way I handled her request, let me explain how we arrived at this moment. My name is Martin Harris. 37 years ago, I was just an 8-year-old boy living at St. Mary's Children's Home in Dorchester. I had no parents, no family, and absolutely no money. I grew up with 46 other forgotten children, eating oatmeal for breakfast and whatever donations came in for dinner. I learned early in life that nobody was going to rescue me, so I had to rescue myself. I started my business journey with a $50 hot dog cart outside Fenway Park when I was 22 years old. I worked 18-hour days through freezing winters and scorching summers. Today, I own the Harris Family Kitchen Restaurant Group, with 8 thriving locations across Massachusetts. We generated over $2 million in net profit last year alone. The flowers, the Parisian dress, the celebrity chef menu. It was all designed to project supreme luxury. Then, 2 weeks before the big day, Madison called me. She had the exact same tone she used when she crashed her car at 17 or maxed out her cards at 23. She told me that Preston's family had concerns about my background, as if being an orphan was a genetic defect. She told me it would be better if I did not attend the wedding because the Blackwoods had a pristine image to maintain in front of their high society associates. She claimed my history of working-class struggle would embarrass her. It was a physical blow to my heart. I raised her, loved her, and financed her entire life, yet I was being discarded because I was a food cart guy who got lucky. I told her I would not attend if that was what she wanted, because I wanted her to be happy. I chose not to fight her. Instead, on her wedding day, I went to St. Mary's and read stories to children who had no families. I hoped she might call after her honeymoon to apologize, but she only called when she needed something. And this time, she needed my beach house. When Madison suggested we meet in person, she specified the South Shore location of my restaurant, a place she had once derided as embarrassingly middle class when she brought Preston by for dinner. 20 minutes later, she walked in, looking around the red vinyl booths and checkered floors, as if she were visiting a museum of the common people. She sat across from me in booth number 7. This was the exact booth where I had taught her how to count change from the cash register when she was a little girl. She looked exhausted, her usual confident demeanor entirely replaced by anxiety. She kept twisting her $20,000 diamond wedding ring. I knew how much that ring cost because I had found the receipt. Preston had charged it to a credit card that was already near its limit. When I asked her how married life was treating her, she confessed that they were facing severe financial difficulties. Rich people never admit they are broke. They call it financial difficulties. She explained that Preston had made several catastrophic investments. He had lost over $300,000 in cryptocurrency and another $400,000 in a tech startup called Virtue Signal Technologies, which turned out to be a massive Ponzi scheme. In total, they were down over $700,000. To make matters worse, they had accumulated over $100,000 in debt across 17 different credit cards. When I suggested they ask Preston's family for assistance, Madison let out a bitter laugh. She revealed that the legendary Blackwood fortune was nothing but smoke and mirrors. Preston's grandfather had lost the bulk of their steel money during the dot-com crash, and his father had been quietly mortgaging their properties to maintain the illusion of high society luxury. Preston was entirely broke, and so was she. Even her $400,000 trust fund was completely gone, because Preston had convinced her to invest all of it into his failed ventures. Preston's family was furious, blaming Madison for bringing bad luck into their lineage and threatening to disown him if he filed for bankruptcy. The irony was incredibly thick. The girl who had discarded her own father for not being of their social class was now being treated as an unwanted outsider by a family of wealthy pretenders. She leaned across the table and asked to borrow my beach house in Cape Cod. She wanted to sell my $2.6 million retirement dream home to cover their bad debts, promising they would buy it back once Preston's highly complex international consulting deals took off. She used the word family to justify her request, reminding me that blood was thicker than water. I asked her where that family loyalty was when she labeled me peasant stock at her rehearsal dinner. She brushed it off, telling me that being my daughter had been a sacrifice because she always had to explain why her father owned restaurants instead of major corporations, and why they lived in a normal house instead of a grand estate. Every word she spoke was like a dagger to my soul. She was entirely devoid of gratitude, viewing me simply as an ATM that she could exploit in her time of need. I told her I would think about her request and call her. She left without a goodbye, confident that I would eventually capitulate, as I always had in the past. But she made a critical error. She had revealed her true character to me, and now it was my turn to show her who I really was. That night, I went to my office above the original restaurant building. I pulled her financial statements, which I still had legal access to since her account was tied to my business structure. What I discovered made my stomach churn. While they were supposedly drowning in debt, they had spent over $200,000 on luxury goods, designer handbags, and expensive dinners in the months leading up to the wedding. Their honeymoon in Italy cost over $67,000, including a $3,000 a night presidential suite in Venice. They were living like royalty on borrowed money, expecting me to bail them out of their reckless extravagance. I printed every single document, creating a file as thick as a phone book, and made a life-altering decision. I picked up the phone and called a number I had not dialed in 15 long years, St. Mary's Children's Home. When Sister Catherine answered, her voice was just as warm, patient, and comforting as it was when I was a terrified 8-year-old boy. To her, I would always be that scared child, regardless of my age or financial success. I asked her about the current state of the orphanage. She told me that funding was incredibly tight and that they desperately needed a new building. The current facility was decaying, the roof leaked constantly, and the heating system was from the 1960s. She estimated that a new building with a playground, a library, and private rooms for the 47 children would cost at least $2 million, a sum they could only dream of raising. I told her that I wanted to make a substantial donation to cover the entire cost of the new building, and that I wanted to do it publicly to raise awareness for the orphanage's mission. She was deeply moved and agreed to prepare everything. I spent the rest of the night coordinating with my attorney, David Chun, and a local news station, Channel 7, to document the donation. The next morning, I met with David at his office in downtown Boston. He reviewed the documents I had requested, an irrevocable transfer of my Cape Cod beach house to St. Mary's Children's Home. David warned me that this was my single largest personal asset, and that once signed, the decision could never be reversed. I told him this was not about revenge, but about values. I wanted to teach my daughter a lesson about the real worth of things, a lesson she had failed to learn despite all the privileges I'd handed her. David finalized the paperwork, noting that the donation would also provide significant tax benefits, which ironically totaled almost the exact amount of Madison and Preston's outstanding debts. He drafted a press release detailing how the donation was inspired by my own childhood at St. Mary's, ensuring the narrative was powerful and clear. Before the signing, my phone rang repeatedly. First, my niece Jennifer called, accusing me of being prideful and unreasonable for refusing to support Madison during a family crisis. When I asked her if she knew that Madison had banned me from her wedding, she fell silent, but still insisted that family must stick together. Then my ex-wife, Linda, called, screaming that I was being heartless and ridiculous. She argued that Preston and Madison's situation was just a temporary setback and that they would eventually repay me. I told Linda that actions have consequences and that bailouts would only prevent Madison from ever growing up. Finally, Preston himself called. His voice had lost all of its previous high society arrogance. He sounded desperate and pathetic. He offered me a 20% partnership in his non-existent international consulting firm in exchange for the beach house. When I asked him if he had considered my feelings when he excluded me from the wedding, he claimed it was merely about optics and social expectations. His hollow apologies and persistent condescension only solidified my resolve. I told him to bring Madison to my office at 2:30 that afternoon, so we could settle the matter once and for all. I sat in my car outside St. Mary's, watching the children play in the courtyard, knowing that by tomorrow, their lives would be changed forever and my daughter would finally understand the true price of her choices. At 2:30 sharp, the stage was set in my office. My attorney, David Chun, stood in the corner with the official documents. Sister Catherine sat quietly, holding a folder of photos of the children. Janet Morrison, a seasoned reporter from Channel 7, had her camera crew positioned and ready to record the live broadcast. Madison lunged forward to grab the papers, but David Chun stepped in, calmly explaining that the transfer was already legally binding and completely irrevocable. Preston's face turned bright red as he realized their financial salvation had just vanished. In his rage, he shouted that nobody cared about some damn orphans, completely forgetting that he was being recorded on live television in front of none. The room went dead silent. The reporter's camera captured every single second of his outburst. Preston tried to backtrack, claiming he was merely upset, but the mask had fallen completely. I signed the second copy of the document. Madison began to weep, accusing me of destroying her life and her future. I asked her if she remembered her wedding day, when she told me I was embarrassing peasant stock who didn't belong in her new world. I told her that she was right. I am peasant stock. Peasants build, they cultivate, they work the land, and they understand that the only true wealth is what you are willing to give away to help others. I signed the third and final copy of the donation papers and handed them to Sister Catherine, who thanked me with tears in her eyes. I looked at Madison one last time, telling her that I loved her, but that I would no longer enable her destructive entitlement. I told her that she now had a choice. She could either learn from this collapse or continue to blame the world for her failures. Preston grabbed her arm and dragged her out of the office, with Madison screaming that she would never forgive me. As the door slammed shut, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had finally drawn a boundary, and in doing so, I had given 75 children a future they never thought possible. The story broke on the 6 o'clock news that evening, and the public reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. I was dining in my South Shore restaurant when the report aired, and the entire dining room erupted into applause for me. My phone was flooded with messages, some from angry family members like Linda, but the vast majority were from strangers thanking me for standing up to entitlement and supporting a worthy cause. The video of Preston's angry outburst went viral on social media, effectively destroying any chance he had of starting a consulting business. Meanwhile, St. Mary's received over $40,000 in spontaneous donations within the first 2 hours of the broadcast, along with offers from construction companies and furniture stores to help build the new facility. I even received a letter from an 8-year-old orphan named Timothy in Texas, thanking me for helping kids like him. I kept his letter in my wallet as a daily reminder of why I did what I did. 6 months later, the new St. Mary's Children's Home opened its doors. It was a beautiful 3-story brick building with 75 private bedrooms, a modern computer lab, a library, and a beautiful playground. I visited the facility and saw Timothy, who had been transferred there, happily writing thank you letters to all the donors. As I was leaving, Sister Catherine handed me an envelope from Madison. Inside was a check for $5,000 made out to the orphanage, along with a deeply moving letter. She explained that she had divorced Preston, moved into a modest studio apartment, and was working as a server at a downtown restaurant while volunteering at a local soup kitchen. She wrote that she was finally learning the value of hard work and honest labor, and hoped that one day I would be proud of her again. I placed her letter in my wallet right next to Timothy's. Another 6 months passed before Madison called me. She was calling to share that she had been promoted to assistant manager and had been accepted into a program for nonprofit management. She finally understood the lesson I had tried to teach her, that true wealth is measured by what we give, not what we accumulate. We agreed to meet for a simple dinner at a small diner near her apartment. It had cost me a $2.6 million beach house, but in return, I had provided 75 children with a safe home, and I had finally helped my daughter find her way back to the values that truly matter. It was the most valuable investment I had ever made, and I would do it again in a heartbeat.